Congressman Armstrong, welcome back to Point of View. Always great to see you. Literally just got off the floor with some votes. If you want to touch anything, maybe that's pertinent here to our audience here in North Dakota. And also if you want to talk about Coal Creek Station, some good news there. And what does that mean for those jobs in North Dakota as a whole?
Yeah, well, we just got off the floor voting on the House version of the Surface Transportation Bill, and we'll talk about that in a second. But let's start with good news. Let's start with what is going on with Coal Creek Station. And for me personally, and it's just great for North Dakota. It's great for all those communities in central North Dakota. I mean, I don't think it's overstating to say without that industry up there, central North Dakota looks very different in 3 years than it does right now. But I think more importantly, it's a good North Dakota company that came in and did this. It's an energy company. I have the benefit of I've known Stacy Charter my entire adult life. Ryan Kopsing, who is a part of it, is my best friend. And so it's just been really good. Sometimes you get these places where you get really good things that happen for the state of North Dakota, and it's done by North Dakotans. And I just don't think we can talk enough about how great this is going to be moving forward.
That is obviously fantastic news. I'm assuming, the jobs are going to have some safety and security there. There's going to be some carbon capture tied in as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to, if anybody can figure out how to navigate these energy markets in these times, it's a company, it's a North Dakota company that has more expertise, I think, in energy markets than probably just about any company in the world. But they've already made a commitment on a lot of the jobs. And obviously, whenever you take something over, there's always going to be some bumps in the road. There has to be. But the real answer here is they're interested in doing business in North Dakota. They're interested in this being in North Dakota. And they're interested in doing what we do best, right? Feed and fuel the world. And we're going to be a part of that. And coming from where we came from 18 months ago, 24 months ago, this is a really big deal. And I don't think we should undersell it at all. I'm really proud to know everybody involved.
Big decision out of the Supreme Court today as far as an Arizona voting rights bill. President Trump at the southern border yesterday. I want to touch on those things. But first, you talked about this transportation bill you just voted on. Anything inside of that? I'm assuming it passed with the Democrats vote. Anything inside of that that's beneficial for North Dakota? Just your take on it.
Well, sure. When you're passing a transportation bill and you're plussing up a lot of those highway funds, all of those things, those are great. If that was what the bill was, we'd probably support it. The problem is that's not all the bill is. The bill is full of absolute goodies and gifts and a lot of the Green New Deal and environmental policies that are simply, the bad far outweighs the good, Chris, and that's the answer. And overall, this is just going to be another policy moving forward towards an unrealistic energy future and an unrealistic infrastructure future.
Is it one of those bills where Jen Psaki can say again that, it was the GOP that wants to defund the police? Is it one of those bills?
No, we did that yesterday. That was great. You can spend 36 months on unbelievably terrible rhetoric towards law enforcement officers. But if you're not going to vote for what will be truly a partisan commission, apparently that negates all the bad things they've said and all the good things that we have done over the last 36 months because, politics.
So I was going to say, sometimes the gall of just what comes out, it's pretty shocking. But,
I don't think the American people are buying it. I used to pick juries for a living, and I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in this town is thinking the American people can't use both their ears and both their eyes and see what's going on.
Before we get to the southern border and the ruling out of the SCOTUS, let's talk about, you mentioned how we feed and fuel America. The drought is very, very bad. What can you be doing in D.C. to help our farmers and ranchers?
Well, first of all, I think the last time we had a bad drought was 2017, but that was even more localized, right? I think, first of all, before you talk about any of the policies, we need to recognize how widespread this drought is and how acute it is in North Dakota. 2 inches of precipitation since October is something we are just simply not used to. But more importantly, it's statewide, right? It covers the entire state. So there's nowhere locally to get feed. And the reason I bring up feed is farmers are obviously getting hurt real bad, but our cattle industry and our ranching industry is the one that really takes it because payments don't feed cows. They just don't. So we're working with the senator's office to get early grazing of CRP. Really want to get some of our crops certified at total loss so we can get cover crop in the ground. So if we do get rain in July and August, we'll have more forage. But we're working with the USDA and any chance we can to make get as many things as flexible as possible. But the bottom line is when you talk about the increase in hay, I mean, if you're going to Southeast Minnesota to buy hay to feed your herd in the western part of the state, that just simply doesn't pencil out. And even with like forage programs and things of that, with the spike in price, even with the federal cost share part of it, you're still paying more than you were last year. And so it's really, really detrimental. And we need every federal agency to help. And even with all the flexibility and all the help in the world, what we're trying to do is, I mean, just legitimately put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound right now. We need rain. And that's the one thing the federal government can't do.
You can make it rain cash with just not actual water.
But right, I mean, the cash issue and that part of it, particularly for ranching, is good. But I don't want to be glib about it. But cash doesn't feed them, right? I think one of the drastic misconceptions about ranching is people think if you have to sell off half your herd in 2021, you just buy it back in 2022, and that just simply. These farmers have taken years, decades to get their herds where they want them to be. And it's just decimating them at this point, just absolutely crushing them. And I mean, when you got people walking out in their pastures at the beginning of June and grass is crunching under their feet, this is going to be a long, hot, dry summer.
So we understand what it's obviously doing to the farmers and ranchers. The other side of the coin now is because of the drought, you're going to continue to see rising food prices. What can you do for the consumer at home right now that's watching and going, hey, Congressman Armstrong, all this inflation is starting to have an impact on my disposable income. What are you going to do to help me out here?
Well, and it's not just inflation, right? I mean, we had the hack at the JBS facility. Prior to that, we had a fire 2 years ago in Kansas that shut down a quarter of a plant and spiked prices. And what the problem with that eventually really becomes is consumers see a higher cost in pricing, but our producers don't see a higher price. And we're dealing with this. And COVID has extrapolated or has exaggerated a lot of these supply chain problems. These cyber attacks have obviously brought those more to the forefront. We have to continue to work forward. We have to do that. But one of the ways we can stop inflation is not spending $10 trillion a year and just throwing money. I mean, just absolutely, just carpet bombing the entire economy with cash.
So what are you going to do then? Because you got Bernie Sanders now looking to do $6 trillion in an infrastructure bill. He runs the Senate Budget Committee. What are you guys going to do to stop this?
We're going to continue to fight it. We're going to continue to do all of the things we can do. There's a 5-vote majority over here, right? We all talk about reconciliation and what's going on over there. But we're going to continue to put as much pressure on different Democrats as possible, right? Because their margins are very, very thin. And over on the House side, you've got a bunch of Northeast Democrats that really care about salt reform and have already said they're not going to support the bill without salt reform. We have to continue to message the American people because we have to put pressure on the people who, if they go reconciliation, Republicans on both sides are really going to be sitting back watching this. So we have two tracks to that, continue to make the case and also put a lot of pressure on a lot of Democrats that might not really be wanting to vote for this bill, whether it's Senator Manchin or Senator Sinema in the Senate or moderate Democrats in the House that not only do they want to win re-election, and I think we always go to that, they fundamentally disagree with a lot of these things as well. So calling to their better angels is always a good strategy, whether it works or not. We can call to the political ramifications all day long, but also the policy ramifications for their states, their districts, and who they represent.
I'm going to get into the election and border stuff in a moment here. And I guess what I want to get your take on, because everyone I talk to right now is like, hey, look, if the Democrats continue to go down this path, it seems like an easy, obvious win for the GOP in the House in 2022, as long as y'all don't screw it up. That's what people say to me. I just want to get your assessment.
Well, I'm an ex-criminal defense attorney and state party chairman. I'll be comfortable with the election the day after the election. Until then, I think we need to continue to work to recruit good candidates, continue to distinguish ourselves in messaging, and continue to call attention to things that really need attention being called to it. The border is a perfect example. It just really is right now. We had a group go down there this week. Obviously, President Trump's going down there. The vice president went close to there, all of these different issues. But, I've been down there, and I think what we really have to continue to message is solving the root causes of migration is a worthy goal. And that is in promoting democracy in other countries, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, are good causes, and we should do those things. But I use the example of going into the emergency room with a broken leg and having high cholesterol. You don't treat the high cholesterol before you treat the broken leg. This is a triage situation right now. We are being overrun. I'm very concerned that the Biden administration is talking about even relaxing more of the regulatory requirements that are associated, actually particularly associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, because our communities down there and stretching all the way across the state are just simply not equipped to handle what is going on right now.
So do you have any data, because they continue to talk about in Texas how, look, this impacts every state in the union. Do you have any data that shows that some of these immigrants are being put into North Dakota? And are you also seeing, big conversation from yesterday was the increase in fentanyl. Are you hearing about more fentanyl being pushed into North Dakota?
No, I told you this the last time. I think what we have to recognize, and I did that. Listen, I was a federal public defender in North Dakota, and 15 of my first 20 cases, this is 2004, 2005, 2006 were illegal reentry cases, right? So we know that there are illegal immigrants who are in North Dakota. They're in all 50 states right now. The data, by the very nature of this, the data doesn't really work. I mean, it's what they're doing officially, but it's also how many people are getting through, because a lot of them are getting through. And you know how you know people are getting through? Because drugs are getting through. When your seizures at the border are increased as much as their seizures on fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, all the illicit drugs are as high as they are, combined with the fact that, the vast majority of your border resources are processing legal immigrants, that just tells you, if you understand how the cartels work and how the crime works, how much is getting through. And those drugs are making it everywhere. And there are 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids ODing all across the country on those drugs that are coming across the border at Mexico. I really don't understand why this has become such a partisan issue. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense to? Border communities. McAllen, Texas elected a Republican mayor for the first time in 85 years, or first time in a generation. 85% of that district is Hispanic. People recognize that this is an untenable situation, and even people who support legal immigration, even people who support the Dreamers, understand that you can't have those programs move forward until you get control of your southern border.